Hi there, and thanks for joining me in this video on how to be an effective Chief Happiness Officer. I've been calling myself Chief Happiness Officer for over 20 years. I do believe I was the world's second ever Chief Happiness Officer, and you may ask, so who was the first one? And I'll tell you, because after I've been using the title for about 6 months, I was like, I should probably Google it so I haven't stolen somebody else's title, and so they don't sue me. So I Googled a Chief Happiness Officer, and I found that there was one before me, and that was Ronald McDonald. They used to call him the Chief Happiness Officer of the McDonald's Corporation. I don't think they do that anymore, and they still haven't sued me. So that's good. Since then, the world has gotten a lot more CHOs, and I think that's amazing. So in this video, we're going to talk about what is a CHO, what do they do, and what is not their job. We're going to talk about what makes a good CHO. How do you, if you have that role, if you want that role, how are you going to be the most effective in that role? What does it take of you? Who can make a good CHO? And I'm going to give you some great examples from some of the many examples of CHOs that I've seen around the world in great workplaces. Ask me anything in the comments. If you're watching this live, write a comment on the webinar page, and I'll take it at the end of the video. If you're watching the video later, write a comment on the video. I'll be happy to respond. I love questions. Why are we talking about this? So companies have, of course, realized that happy employees lead to better results and that happy companies make more money. There are about 1 million reasons why, and these are just some of them. Higher productivity, higher sales, higher customer loyalty, higher everything, higher stock price, higher profits, higher growth, higher everything. So happy employees running a happy organization is simply good for business. What I've observed though is that companies keep doing this the wrong way. Either they do the wrong things, and I've talked about this a lot, that a lot of companies, focus on things that make employees satisfied, not happy. Things like pizza parties, cake day, perks, a gym in the office, yoga classes, that kind of thing. That's never going to make employees happy. It's at best going to make them satisfied. I've talked about that distinction before. So companies keep doing the wrong things, very expensive things, by the way, and things that just don't work. But the other thing I've also noticed is that even if they do the right things, it becomes very sporadic. It's like, the company does something. They're like, employees are super important. We want you all to be happy. They do something, and then they don't do anything for 6 months. And then they're like suddenly remember, oh yeah, there was that happiness thing. We should probably do something about that. They do something else, and then nothing for 9 months, right? So it becomes like very sporadic, very intermittent. There is no real direction. There is no real sense of a plan behind it. There's no real sense that this is something the organization takes seriously. And I think that is a huge mistake. So that's why I think chief happiness officers come in, because they can fix that and they can make sure that the company approaches this the right way. Everything else that's important in an organization has somebody in charge of it. Like the money is important, so there's a chief financial officer. The technology is important, so there's a chief technological officer, and so on and so on and so on. And if happiness is important, and it is, and more workplaces are realizing that, then we need a chief happiness officer. But just to make this very clear, the chief happiness officer's job is not to make everybody happy. It's not to be some kind of like an in-workplace clown or entertainer whose job is to go around to every desk and make sure that everybody's having a good day today. That would, honestly, I would hate that so much. That would be terrible. So that is very much not the job. The job is, the way I see it, let's define it, it's a project manager role. The chief happiness officer is the project manager of the happiness project. Yeah. So more than anything else, it's somebody who's good with structure, somebody who's good with making a plan. We're going to talk about exactly how to make that plan in an effective way. But this, I think, is a key distinction. Your job as a chief happiness officer is not to make everybody happy, but it's to make a plan that will make everybody happy eventually down the road. Yeah. Who can be a good chief happiness officer? I think it needs to be somebody with like a sense of structure, somebody who can make a plan and make sure we follow that plan, but also needs to be It also needs to be somebody who's passionate about happiness, right? Somebody who actually cares about the happiness of their coworkers and people in the organization. That's super important. It needs to be somebody who's empathetic, because you need to be able to relate to many different kinds of people, and you need to realize that what makes this person happy is not what makes that person happy. People can be very different. People are very different. So that's super important, that you can listen to people, get people, have that sense of empathy. You need to be brave, because this is not uncontroversial. You'd think that everybody would be into happiness. And I think once people understand what this is about, they are. But in the beginning, there can be a lot of resistance, and taking on this role is to some degree sticking your neck out and saying, I believe in creating a happy workplace. And not everybody's going to be on board from the beginning. There will be resistance, so you need to be brave enough to be able to face that resistance constructively. And finally, a good chief happiness officer is somebody who's into the science, somebody who actually cares about the research in this field. And there is so much cool research in this field. Research into the advantages of happiness at work, into what makes us happy at work, what makes us unhappy at work, what kind of initiatives work, what kind of initiatives don't work. And I do believe that if you want to be an effective chief happiness officer, you need to follow that science. You need to care about that science. I personally think I follow this very close because I think it's so cool that we finally have data on what makes us happy or unhappy at work. I just love that stuff. And if you don't follow the science, then there's every chance that whatever initiatives you do plan are not going to be effective, because they're not going to be things that are proven to work. It's also going to be harder to get people excited about the initiatives if you can't prove that this is something that's likely to work, because there's research behind it. So those are that's I think this is where it all should come from. Alrighty. So I said that the chief happiness officer role is a project manager role. Excellent. What should be involved in that? Here are some of my thoughts on that. I think this would be a good way to tackle it. And more or less in this order too. So start by securing top level support. If you don't have management support for the happiness project, it's going to die. That's just the way it is. You need a budget. Maybe you probably don't need a huge budget, but you need some budget. Somebody needs to approve of that. And you also need management attention and support for the project. We're going to talk about exactly how to secure that, but I think start there, because if you don't have that, it's not going to work. Then I think you need to make a plan. And again, this is a structured plan. Maybe for the next 3 to 6 months, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. Then, of course, you need to communicate the plan, so people know what's coming. So people know these are the happiness initiatives that are happening in the organization. You need to, of course, execute the plan. If you said this is going to happen on that date, you need to make sure that it actually happens. You need to follow up on successes and fails. So if something works really well, follow up on that, figure out what worked. If something did not work, learn from that. Don't just ignore it. Don't just hide from it, but actually make sure that you look at it and say, okay, so we tried doing this. That was apparently a bad idea. People hated it. Why? What can we learn from that for next time? Part of the plan should absolutely be to measure the impact of this. And you can measure the impact directly on employee happiness, or you can measure the impact on relevant business metrics, like, for instance, productivity or absenteeism or employee customer satisfaction or whatever. But it's super important that you actually measure the impact of whatever it is you're doing. And finally, celebrate the wins. If something goes really well, make sure to shout it from the rooftop so people know, this happiness project is happening and we're doing all of these amazing things. And I wanna make it very clear that this doesn't have to be huge. It doesn't have to be like monumental, massive initiatives, like a huge corporate party with live bands and that kind of thing. That's fine. You can do that maybe once a year. It can be a lot of small things. I actually think that's more effective if you do a lot of small things rather than just one big thing. I want to show an example. This is from Innocent Drinks, where Tim Dorsett used to be their chief happiness officer. By the way, he didn't have that title. He had different titles when he was there. And chief happiness officers may not have that specific title. And that's perfectly fine. The important thing is that this is the person who's in charge of making sure that we do things to make employees happy. And Tim absolutely was that person. And I want to show an example of something that, two things that he did at Innocent that turned out to work really, really well.
This here is sexy power suit day. Okay. Now this is the smartest I've looked for a long time. By the way, you're welcome. I usually wear t-shirts and jeans or something like that, running around the office. I asked every member of the UK office to come into work in an uncomfortable suit, and they did it. They dressed up like this. Why? I don't really know, but because we have the energy and the kind of staff that want to do it. Now, the real reason is, can you see the guy on the far right with the glasses? See the guy with the glasses? That's Tom. He left Innocent about 3 months ago to go and work for the government, in HR in the government. And because I was like, you're going to have a terrible time working for the government. It's going to be really boring. You're going to be wearing a suit every day. I thought, how can we ease him into that life? And so I emailed everybody in the business and said, to say goodbye to Tom, I would like us all to help him embrace the new life he's going to have and wear a suit. And everyone did it. Isn't that amazing? I can ask my staff to do that and they do it. I think that's just incredible. And these are what we call surprise and delighting moments, including this. We have 2 lifts at Innocent. If you ask me, they are the most boring part of a building. No one ever does anything in a lift. So I went to a big supermarket and I spent £60 on all that terrible stuff that teenagers buy each other at Valentine's Day. And I turned the lift into the lift of love, okay? So I bought a helium balloon, I put bunting up, I bought a CD player and Barry White. Put it in the corner, it made for some very awkward lift journeys. It was very good. I bought love heart Post-its and stuck them up, and I'd written who I fancied in the office. By the end of the day, it was full. Everyone found the moment to tell the person they fancied them. But this costs me £60. Now, a lot of companies have a big budget, and I've got a great budget to make these things work. But what I asked for was that £60 not to buy 4 more bottles of wine at the Christmas party, which would be in my budget, but to make people come to work. This guy, Dan, had a terrible day at work, but the thing he wanted to go home and tell his girlfriend was, look at what Innocent did today. I want to make people smile every day.
I think that kind of thing is hilarious. And it again, can be done on no budget. And yeah. And also what's crucial here is that these are things that he knew would fit inside Innocence culture. This would not go over well anywhere, in every kind of workplace. But at Innocent, he knew this kind of thing would work because, of course, he has empathy. He knows the culture. So that kind of thing, I think, is just amazing. So having that plan, executing the plan, following up on the plan, absolutely crucial. That is the role. And as I said, you need to be able to convince top leadership that this is a good idea, so they should support it. And how do you do that? I thought a lot about that. And I think these are some of the crucial steps. First of all, connect happiness to business results. Instead of just saying, we're going to make our employees happy, it's going to be so nice when everybody's happy all day. That's great. But if you can show, by the way, this is going to be good for employee retention, this is going to help us save money on absenteeism, this is going to help us recruit the best talent, and so on and so on and so on, then it's much more likely that they're going to take it seriously. And you can certainly look at the upsides. This is how happiness at work is going to make us more money. This is going to how it's going to boost our business. But what might actually be more effective is to look at the downsides and how it can avoid that. So if you can find top management's pain points, what are they worried about? What's keeping them up at night? Maybe customer satisfaction is low, and customers are not happy, they're not coming back. Maybe quality is low, we have a lot of defects in our products. Maybe employee retention is low, and our employees keep quitting to go work for the competition. If you can find out, what are their 2 or 3 pain points, and then use the research and the science to find out, to search, to show them, if our employees were happier, they would stay in their jobs longer and retention would go up. If employees were happier, they would be healthier, they wouldn't be sick as often, and absenteeism would go down. If employees were happy, they would be more conscientious in their work, they would care more about the quality, and defects in our products would go down. Find their pain points and show how happiness can address that, can be an even more convincing argument. But on top of that, there's also an ethical argument. There's also an argument where you can say that, if we run a workplace that is unhappy, where people don't feel good, that's actually hurting people. And again, there's a lot of research on that. And we shouldn't do that. That's wrong. I don't think managers really want to hurt their employees. I know there are some psychopaths in business who just don't care. But most managers don't want to have a negative effect on their people. So if you can show them that, well, we currently have that and we shouldn't do that, then that can be an ethical argument that helps convince them to support the happiness project. Another thing you can do is you can lower the bar and make it simpler for them to support the project. And you can do that by showing that this is actually kind of cheap. This is not something that's going to require a massive budget or take 3 years. No, give me this tiny budget and 6 months and I'll, make an impact and we'll get started on the happiness project. And I also think that what you can do to lower the bar is to show that it's not about creating the best workplace ever. It's not about creating the perfect workplace where everybody is happy all the time. It's just about getting us started in a direction of better, in the direction of creating a better and happier workplace. And every step we take along that way is going to benefit the organization's results. And finally, show them that you're going to measure the results of the impact of the happiness project, and give them specific metrics. We're going to measure employee happiness, yes, but we're also going to measure customer loyalty. We're going to measure absenteeism, retention, whatever metrics make sense, whatever metrics are most relevant for the organization. Measure the impact on those metrics. So that's how you convince top leadership to get on board. Is this going to convince everybody? Hell no. Some leaders have convinced themselves that this happiness crap is just not relevant. It's soft, it's fluffy. People should just do their jobs and they can be happy in their spare time. And those managers you will never convince. You can sing and dance all you want. It's just not going to happen. And my advice is, if you work for an organization like that with those kinds of bosses, is quit and go work somewhere else. It's never going to happen. But a lot of bosses can be convinced if you have these arguments in place. However, you also need to convince employees, because happiness isn't really something you can do to others. It is, to a very large degree, something they need to do for themselves. So you need employees on board with the happiness project. Otherwise, you can create all kinds of initiatives, but if they don't want to participate, it's not going to work. Each initiative might be good, but if people don't do it, if people aren't there, it doesn't work. That's basic logic. So how do you convince employees? Here are some thoughts on that. Give them knowledge, tools, and energy. Give them the knowledge to understand why this is a good initiative. Give them the tools to do something themselves, and give them the energy to actually do it. Focus on results and relationships. That's our model for what really makes people happy at work. It's not pizza parties and yoga classes. It's doing great work together with great people. And remember to focus on both, because some people are results oriented, some people are relationship oriented. One thing that really helps convince employees to participate is when the leaders participate. We did a lot of work. We did some work with a pension company in Denmark called SEB Pension, where they had a chief happiness officer who was supported by the CEO. And one of the things the CEO did was that every time they had some kind of initiative, some kind of event, he was there. He was part of it. And that showed the employees that he valued it, he took it seriously, and that helped them take it seriously as well. Share and celebrate the good stories. So if something works really well, if you have this initiative and this team participates and they have a great time, it makes them happier. Find that story, share that story, spread it widely across your organization, and involve employees directly. Again, instead of making happiness something we do to people, make it something they do themselves. Here are a couple of ideas. You can have a group of happiness ambassadors. I've seen that work really well, who are part of creating the plan for happiness that the CHO is responsible for, and part of coming up with ideas and executing the plan. And what's really cool about having this group is that then you have now more brains to come up with all the ideas, and more people to actually execute the different initiatives. And here's a fun idea. If you have somebody in the organization that is going to be really skeptical about all this happiness crap, invite them to the group. Make them part of it. They might have a really valuable perspective. And if they're part of the process, then they're invested in making this work and might not resist it as much. This reminds me of when Abraham Lincoln was president of the US. He appointed a lot of his political opponents to his cabinet because, as he said, he would rather have them inside the tent pissing out than outside the tent pissing in. And you can do the same thing here. So having this group of happiness ambassadors who are involved in making this plan, again, I think can be a great idea. I've seen that work really well in many organizations. But you can also just set employees free to do kind of whatever they want. This is from a company called Pier 1 Hosting in the UK. And they have this thing where any employee who has a good idea for something that they can do to create happiness at work that costs less than £100 can just do it. In this case, somebody went out and bought space hoppers for the office because they thought that might be fun. So if you have an idea, it's going to cost £80. You just go out and do it, and the company will reimburse the money later. You don't need to seek approval. You can just go ahead and do it. And that's a great chance for employees to get involved directly themselves. So it's bottom up. People always ask me, is happiness in an organization, is that top down or bottom up? And the answer is yes, it is both. Cool. So get top leadership on board, get employees on board with a plan. That's, I think, where we need to go. There are some pitfalls you need to avoid. I've also seen these projects not work or fail over time. And these are some of the main pitfalls that I've seen. One is ignoring the problems. In many organizations, they're here's the thing. Every organization has problems, right? No workplace is perfect. The perfect workplace does not exist. But the good workplaces are willing to acknowledge and fix the problems they have, right? So if your happiness, if you come in with a happiness project that's all about, creating better vibes and making employees happy, while the organization is facing serious problems with, employees are frustrated over this or that, it's going to be very hollow. It's going to be very superficial, and people will not take it seriously. So I actually think that part of a happiness project is recognizing, hey, we have this problem. Here's how we're going to fix that. Talking openly and honestly about the problems we see in the organization. I visited a social media agency in Cape Town, South Africa, called Quirk, where they actually had a chief happiness officer who was elected by the employees. And part of their duties was to administer this process for coming up with ideas and implementing ideas. And this could both be positive, like, let's try improving this, or it could also be fixing problems, like, it's super annoying that we always have this issue. What can we do about that? So talking openly and honestly about the problems, I think, ignores this pitfall. And I've seen the other thing happen where, employees are frustrated about this and that, and nobody will talk about that, but here's a pizza party. And it's just not going to work. Another pitfall that I've seen again and again and again is that we put relationships over results. We need both to be happy, but very often when we're like, let's create a happiness project, it becomes, let's have Friday beers, let's have Monday morning breakfast, let's have a movie night, let's go bowling. So it's all about relationships. But some people are more results oriented. Some people care more about their skills, their knowledge, their professionalism, doing their jobs well. And you need events, you need initiatives that also cater to the results oriented people. Maybe have a hackathon where people can work on projects together. Maybe have a skill share where people can, share the knowledge they have and teach others what they're really good at, so they can share the results they create. Fear of resistance. Very often we stop ourselves from doing something because we're afraid people will hate it. And that's fine. I mean, if you do something and nobody hates it, maybe it was a little boring. If 99% hate it, love it, and 1% hates it, maybe that's great. Being a CHO requires a little bravery. Often there are too many big initiatives. It's like, huge summer party, great, but the summer party is once a year. What are we doing every week? What are we doing every month? And then the biggest pitfall is no follow-up. That it becomes, here's the big initiative, and then nothing happens, and people don't hear anything ever again. And I think that is a huge problem. because then the next time you restart the project, you're like, oh yeah, we had the happiness project. Let's do this now. People will be like, yeah, we remember the last time you did that, and then no follow up, and nothing ever came of it. So you need to build some consistency. You need to build some momentum, some flow in this project, and follow up on each initiative. Cool. And final tip, keep it fresh. If you keep doing the same things over and over and over, they're going to be less and less and less effective. So constant reinvention is part of the game here, and something you need to keep in mind in this process. Yes. Cool. Let me check. Let me check and see if there are any questions. Yes, we do have 2 questions here. First one. Yeah, that's a good one. Hang on. Do you think top management sometimes appoints a CHO as an alibi, almost like greenwashing, so they don't have to do anything about happiness at work? I guess that could happen. I have not seen that happen. Oh, hang on. I guess it could. I've never seen that happen. But if that does happen, I think it will reveal itself very quickly. I mean, it's gonna be very obvious very quickly whether or not management is actually serious about this project, or is it something they're doing as an alibi, because they feel they have to. And I've definitely worked with organizations where they said they were serious about it, and then it turned out, they weren't, and they never did anything else. And honestly, that sucks. It's very frustrating when that happens. But the cool thing is that, when organizations do it, it works. It absolutely makes a difference. Cool. So, a good question. What can you do as a regular employee with no top level support? You can do a lot. It's never going to be as effective or as centralized as like an officially appointed CHO with top level support, but you can definitely do some things just for yourself in your own team with the people you work with. One of the most interesting projects I've seen was at Pfizer, where some employees got together and created their own internal happiness group. And they just, they had no budget, no top level support. They just started doing things. They put out a happiness newsletter that a lot of people inside the organization subscribed to, and they did various little events. And I thought that was great. I work with the Shell refinery in Denmark, where the one of the electricians decided he wanted to be the chief happiness officer, and asked for a little bit of budget to create some different events, like a coffee tasting, that kind of thing. And you can definitely do things, even if it's not, you can make yourself your own chief happiness officer, even if you're not officially appointed to that position. I actually think that can make a difference. But if we want to create a happy workplace, if we want to spread this across the organization, then we absolutely need top level support and a budget that matches that and makes it happen. Thank you for the questions. Those were great. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Stay happy.